Hi, Kyle Frost here, independent Australian financial advisor, hoping to use my experience to put out valuable finance content in a more detailed way. Superannuation is a very tax-effective way of saving for retirement. The only downside is that you lose accessibility, so you can't access your superannuation for most people until you're 60. So there's two ways you can get money into superannuation that we'll go through today. So they're concessional and non-concessional, and then we'll go through the few different kinds between them. See just here, there's concessional contributions, and there's three main types of these. So what we're most familiar with is your employer contribution. Each month or each quarter, your employer mandatory puts in your contributions, and these count towards your concessional contribution caps, as well as salary sacrifice, which you can nominate to your employer to salary sacrifice to superannuation, or you can actually make a what's called a personal deductible contribution, where you actually contribute funds from your own bank account to your superannuation fund and then claim a tax deduction for that. So the benefit of making a concessional contribution is there's a benefit of getting into super where it's invested tax effectively, but you get a tax deduction for it, so you're going to save tax immediately, but then you get a contribution tax on the way in, so you don't save all of that, you save the difference. So for instance, if you're on the 39% marginal tax rate, you say, well, I've got a 39% saving, less the 15% contribution tax on the way in, and then so deduct 39 from 15, you've got 24, so there's a 24% saving there. So on $1,000, that's $240. I will just note here, there's a thing called Division 293 tax. So that's for people who earn over 250,000, including those contributions, where there's an additional 15% tax on those amounts over the 250,000. So of these contributions between all of these three up here, you've got a cap now of $30,000. That's only just recently gone up for next financial year. So there is a thing called the carry forward rule. So what that means is if your balance is under $500,000, you have access to what's called the carry forward rule for 5 years prior. So that means that it's not a use it or lose it anymore. So previously, if you hadn't used your 30,000 or 27.5 or whatever it was in those years, you kind of lost that. So it effectively means that if you're in a position where you have a windfall or you sell an investment property and you want to save tax in that year, there could be a tax opportunity to make a larger concessional contribution. So I'm just using an example here. Let's say Bob earns $100,000 and he makes a $10,000 concessional contribution. So that means that he gets the tax deduction. So his taxable income is now $90,000. Bob earning $100,000, his marginal tax rate is 34.5%. So then just in that example up there, deducting the 15%, there's a 19.5% differential there. So timing that by the 10,000 contribution, there's now a $1,950 tax saving. So depending how you do it, just going up here to the salary sacrifice versus personal contribution, they effectively on a dollar basis get the same outcome. There's just a bit of a timing difference. So the salary sacrifice, you get the tax benefit of that immediately because your employer effectively deducts it from your pay. Whereas personal deductible, it's kind of, you've got the flexibility, that's the benefit, that you can really dial it in. So you can wait until the end of June and you know what your employer contributions are exactly or really close to, and you can really, I guess, get to that amount. And it's important to note as well, it's not either or. You can effectively salary sacrifice throughout the year, and if it hasn't been dialed in, you've got a few $100s extra, you can effectively just make a personal deductible contribution. So that's the concessional contributions. So now just going over to the non-concessional. So non-concessional, I would say, without making a generalization, I think it's usually for people who are getting closer to retirement and they've maxed out their concessional contributions, and now they're just really looking to get their investment portfolio or their future investment portfolio from their savings into a tax effective environment. And the reason why I say that is if you're an income earner, it's almost always best to maximize your concessional contributions, just because you do get upfront benefit as well as then they're invested in a tax friendly environment. Whereas non-concessional, you don't get that upfront benefit, but they are then just as concessional, they're invested tax effectively. So along those lines, that obviously covers off that, you do get a cap of 120,000. So it's a lot more generous. So it means you can get a lot more in and a lot more quickly. So there's a thing called the bring forward. So it's kind of the opposite to the concessional carry forward. So you can kind of bring forward the future years up to, I guess, two years in addition to the current year. So it means that with the new rate of 120,000 from 1 July, you can effectively put in 360,000 in one foul swoop effectively. So here's an example here is, let's say Jenny inherits $470,000 and she wants to put that into superannuation. It's appropriate to do so, and she's maxed all her concessional contributions and it was appropriate for her to do so. She can put in 110,000 prior to 30 June. So that's in this financial year. So she hasn't triggered the bring forward, and that's this year's cap. And then on 1 July effectively, it doesn't have to be exactly these dates, but just thinking through the financial years, she can put in 120,000 plus the next financial year and the year after that, so that's 240, so 360 altogether, and that's all in superannuation. So effectively over a really short period of time, 2 days if it was perfect, in reality with processing times probably a week or so, you've effectively got $470,000 into superannuation. There's no upfront benefit of that. She doesn't save tax in terms of tax deductions or anything like that. But now that $470,000 is invested simply within superannuation and tax effectively. So let's say that over her retirement, so 30 years or something like that, and that 470 over 30 years goes to $1 million. Who knows what the investment returns will be? But you're usually on that capital gain. So if it's in superannuation, you've kind of quarantined that in terms of as that grows, it's not accruing a tax liability effectively. Whereas if you invest that outside, whether you sell it as you get older or it's inherited, there's a big capital gain there. One thing just to note between the concessional and the non-concessional is concessional make up what's called taxable portion of your superannuation, where this concessional makes up a tax-free portion of your superannuation. If you're making a large non-concessional, because it makes part of the tax-free, it can actually be the strategy to put that into a separate account or a separate super fund, just to segregate that taxable and tax-free portion. And the main benefits of that is estate planning. That covers off all of that. Yeah, hopefully that was useful. If you have any questions, feedback or suggestions for future topics, put them in the comments and I'll reply. And if you'd like more content like this, please subscribe. I'll see you next time.